All right, you did it. You clicked the play button. And here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. If this should happen to be the first time you're ever listening to the show, let me welcome you. Everyone else, what's up? How is everyone feeling? And who are you? I was just contemplating before I hit the record button about who I was talking to, like who listens to this. And I think in the past, I felt like I had a clearer idea about who you are. And some of you I know, there is a select group of you who have been listening since the beginning and are still here. And if that is you, I love you. I love you so much. You know who you are. We've probably exchanged emails at some time, or maybe we've even met in person, or maybe we haven't, but you've been listening since the beginning and you're still tuning in every week. Kudos to you. But there's definitely a percentage of listens that happen each week that are not that select group of people, that are people who come in and come out maybe for a time. Maybe they haven't been here since the beginning. Maybe you've been here for the last couple years. I don't know. I don't know who you are. And I'm wondering, are you a yoga teacher? I mean, I imagine that you would be. Like, who would care about this show? One, you'd have to be interested in yoga and teaching yoga, I imagine. Or have some connection maybe to me, either from listening to the show where you've connected with me in intros and outros over the years. Or shout out to my new friend Sharon, who's been listening to the show, who lives here in the neighborhood. She's probably the only person in my neighborhood who listens to this. And Sharon's not a yoga teacher, but she is a friend. And she's a yoga student. And she has interest for that reason. So maybe some of you are just people who are into yoga on one level or another, and you like to hear people talk about it. But in that case, maybe some of these conversations that I've been having over the last few weeks about the profession of yoga and whether or not you can make a living at it probably wouldn't be very relevant to you. Maybe it's still kind of interesting, but you don't have any stake in that. Although I imagine there are some of you who do. And I know there are some of you who do because I have gotten emails. And one thing that has been clear is that there is a generational thing that depending on what stage of life you're in, your perceptual lens and your actual ability to make a living will depend. You require different amounts of money to live at different stages of your life, and you're capable of outputting a certain amount of energy and effort at different amounts and different stages of your life. And so to answer the question of whether or not it's still possible to make a living would really depend. And the truth is there are people who are doing it. And some of them have been reaching out to me to tell me that. And two of them are here today as my guests. Giana, Gambino, and Bradshaw West from the Funny Thing About Yoga podcast are here today. I don't know if you're familiar with that podcast, but they had me on their show a little while back. I'm very happy to be bringing them to you today because they are like a generation or two behind me and they're making it work. And they're doing that a lot through trainings and retreats, as well as holding it down with weekly classes at gyms and yoga centers. So they're very much in the scene in both Chicago and San Francisco. And that's kind of what I love about their show is you definitely get an insider take of what's going on out there. And it is from a different generation than me. And I really dug it. I dug the energy that I got from them. They're super fun. And I was really glad to connect with them. Very happy to be bringing that to you today. Real quick before we get to it, let me say something to those of you who have been listening for some time who are not currently Podcast Premium subscribers. I would like to encourage you to consider doing that. I'm going to be real with you. I keep getting these emails from my podcast host because now they got all these new AI tools to do ad insertions on your podcasts. And I could be making some money if I just said, go ahead. All I got to do is say, go ahead, and they'll turn it on, and then they'll start plugging in ads. And I could be making money off of that. But, I don't want to do that. And it's not that much money. I wouldn't need that many of you to sign up as Podcast Premium subscribers to make up that difference. So, for whatever it's worth, if you enjoy the show and you listen to this show, perhaps you will consider supporting this show. You also get access to the full-length archives. If you haven't gone back and listened to all the old episodes, you can listen to them in their full length. You can do that for as little as $5 a month. Please consider doing that. Become a Podcast Premium subscriber. Also, if you want to connect with me in other stuff, I've got ongoing live classes, got a weekly discussion group, got on-demand videos. You can find all of my stuff at jbrownyoga.com. Okay? Okay. I think that is good enough. I will touch base with you on the other side, but let's go ahead and get into this. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Giana, Gambino, and Bradshaw West. Hey.
Hey, Jay. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. What's going on?
Same shit, different day. What about you?
I'd say that's a fair assessment of my situation as well. Mostly, but I'm talking to you, so that's a little bit different than my usual.
Yeah, and for some reason, my name is Giana Gambino, which I think is really interesting. Maybe I should edit that.
I saw that. Was she using that laptop at some point?
Not that I remember. Oh my God, Jay, we were just in Nicaragua, and Giana and I were doing a bunch of work, and she had her laptop, and I was talking, blah, 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 and I knocked over a thing of water, and like we had all of this, all of these recordings on the podcast built over her computer, and I could see her starting to have a panic attack, and I was like, I literally went, please, I'm begging you.
Okay, well, listen, when she gets here, we got to discuss new protocols to make sure you guys aren't in that situation again. You got to got backup plans. You can't leave it like that.
I know. It was fine. It ended up being fine, but and we were like in front of 16 students, and I was like, I know you're really anxious, but do not have a panic attack in front of these 16 students. It's not going to be good.
Well, very good. Not so there's no surprises. I'm recording. I want us to consider ourselves having just begun. I know Giana's on her way. I guess she had a thing and she's going to get here as soon as she can.
Yeah, I'm sending her the link right now. She'll be here in 1 second.
No worries.
She's been trying because she's like, just moved to San Francisco not too long ago. So I bet she's been trying to just pick up, the world, like pick up, meet people, take classes, do classes. And so she was just teaching for someone.
Got to be a little bit on call if you want to get into the good graces, right?
Literally, we talk about this all the time. She's like, I know I don't want to do this. I'm like, I know, but you have to. She's like, should I sub this class? I'm like, you got to. Totally. At least for like the first 6 months when you were like, it's not like that always. If you're a good teacher, people will realize, and it doesn't take that long, but like you kind of have to do that work.
Here she is. Let me bring her in.
Okay.
Hi, Giana. We were just discussing how when you're coming on like a podcast that's like all about yoga teachers and like the real deal of yoga teachers.
Yes.
And you have to reach out and ask if you can push to go this a little like 30 minutes later because you're trying to get into the good graces of a new yoga scene and you picked up a yoga sub last minute.
Well, actually, there's some details on that. I didn't pick it up last minute.
Okay.
It's just that so this is like the owner of the studio, someone who's very popular here in San Francisco, and they don't go through the subsystem like everyone else. They go through managers find them subs because they only let certain people sub their classes. So it just wasn't in my calendar because they didn't confirm it because it doesn't go into the system because it's word of mouth. And I was like, oh crap. So
you got to do it. No, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Good reason.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being flexible with us, pushing this back. And then also like, I don't know if Bradshaw told you, but I ended my class 1 minute early and I'm like ready to leave. And then everyone, I just like always say, because it's a prime time slot with a lot of students, I'm like, so if you liked my class, these are the times you can find me. And I've got some things coming up. I told them about our retreat in Italy. And then I had all these people talking to me about Italy. And I was like, oh my God, I got to tell them about Italy. So
all good. All good. And just to say, we're already in it. I'm recording. So just consider us having begun.
It's all fair game.
Yeah.
Yes. Don't say anything you don't want anybody to hear is what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. There's not a lot. Sometimes Giana will be like, remember when we talked about this on the podcast? And like, or people will come up to me and I'm like, oh shit, I don't remember saying that, but I did, I guess.
But I did.
But I did, unfortunately. But I was just telling Giana, when we were in Nicaragua and you had your computer and I was telling him the story of me spilling water on your computer and the heart attack.
Yeah, he did that. And then he prayed to his dead mother that it didn't die. That might. He's like, please, Mom, make her computer not.
Literally, because I was like, Giana is so unbelievably organized. Like sometimes, like so. I mean, thank God I'm working with her. She's so organized, and I just felt for her, there's so much anxiety wrapped around like not being able to look at spreadsheets and prices. Like it would have been a really big fuck up. So we were really happy. Everything is
on the cloud, but I just wouldn't have a way to access that. So I am backed up, everyone.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what I was going to say. Like I have very strict protocols. Like I have a backup here that's going manual. I'm going to upload it to the cloud as soon as we're done. Like I do all these things because that happened like once to me. And then I was like, never again.
It's the worst. Yeah. No, we had a mini panic attack, but crisis averted.
Well, when did you guys get back from that retreat?
Saturday.
Okay.
Saturday. But it's like a full day of travel.
Long
now
travel.
That we're living, it's long travel days. There's no real direct flights to Nicaragua. I don't think, maybe there are from other parts.
We can talk about that because I used to arrange a lot of travel and nowadays I'm finding it much more fraught than it used to be. So I want to talk to you guys about like the organizing of retreats that you guys do. But first, just for people listening, we just jumped in, which I think is perfect. But for people who are listening who maybe aren't familiar with you, I was on your podcast not too long ago, The Funny Thing About Yoga. And I started listening a little bit before that. And then especially when I knew I was going to come on because I wanted to familiarize myself with like what you guys were about. And I've been listening since, and I've been enjoying it quite a bit. It's a really fun show, and I'm happy to turn people onto it if they're not already familiar with it.
Oh, thank you.
That means a lot. We really appreciate it. We loved your episode so much. When you got off the computer, Jen and I called each other. I'm like, that was the easiest conversation we've ever had. We could really tell
why you've been doing it for so long because you're just so skilled at, being able to relate and talk to just anyone about anything.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Well, what I think is one of the most appealing things for me about your show, and I imagine why a lot of yoga teachers listen to it, but don't necessarily realize why, is that you have a collaboration. Like you two are working together on stuff. It's very rare. In fact, on my show just this last week, I mentioned like how lonely it sometimes feels. And like we do these things to have communities to bring teachers together so we can actually talk about stuff. But to have somebody to work with is a thing. And I don't think I've had that. Like I've had somebody who kind of handled like a bunch of the business side of things. And I was sort of like the yoga side of things. And I've had that kind of collaboration. And it is a collaboration still, But I don't even remember, like, back in the day, like, I remember someone reaching out and asking if I wanted to co-teach It was kind of a thing. Like if you split it up and like I teach some classes and you teach other classes, maybe that can work if what we do goes together well. Or like some people like I'll teach the first half of the class and you teach the second half. And I was always like, no way, that seems like crazy to me. So in any case, you both not only host a podcast together, but you do like co-teach retreats and trainings together. And some part of me envies that. Like you've got like somebody to bounce off of and work with, and that kind of dynamic between you is very infectious. So it's a pretty cool thing that you have, and it's very rare. You know, a lot of times those kinds of collaborations are hard to make last. I guess I'm curious about how that started. If I heard correct, you two met in a Jason Crandall 300-hour teacher training. If I'm not mistaken, it was one of the last in-person 300-hour trainings in San Francisco at that famed location, which name is eluding my brain right now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Do I have that correct?
Yes. Well, we had known each other previously just from like being yoga teachers in Chicago, but we weren't really friends or connected. And I've told this story a lot, but for your audience, like I tell this story where I wanted to be Bradshaw's friend and he wasn't having it. Like I really liked his classes, and I think he's teaching 1 year longer than I am. So I was still mulling over doing a teacher training, and I would take his classes, and I like wanted to talk to him about the teacher training options and all that. And you really didn't give me the time of day, Bradshaw, until we were basically in San Francisco with each other.
In isolation.
In isolation. It was like, so we went to San Francisco. There were maybe 2 other teachers from Chicago there, Bradshaw, that we knew, but we like had more familiarity with each other. And then we just kind of, this is how it happened, Jay. I like to walk into the studio. I find my spot. I don't like to be front row center. I like to be just a little bit off center, but front row, because I don't have the greatest hearing. So, but I don't want to be seen. So that's important to know. So I'm like all the way to the left side. He comes walking in and he sets up his mat 1 inch, just 1 inch from my mat. He's like, hey, how are you? And then I was like, oh, now we could be friends. And it's really because he doesn't know how to take notes and he just wanted all my notes. So.
100%. I was like, you're taking notes, right? You're living in Chicago. Good. Okay. Thanks for letting me know.
So 1 inch, just 1 inch. And then it's like during training, it's like we should be social distancing. I was like, I can't get this guy off of me.
Wait, so you didn't know each other at all back in Chicago?
We knew each other just but like in passing. Yeah, like she used to take my class. I knew her name. We followed each other on Instagram, but it was like we weren't friends. You know, we were more acquaintances.
Yeah, Bradshaw likes I was just going to say, you like to like teach classes and leave. Like he very much is just like when he's done working, he's done. Like his energy is conserved for the next class. And I'd be like, hey, let's talk about crow pose. And he's like, no, I have to go. But yeah, which I respect that. And
when you teach 16 classes a week, you kind of got to do that more than if you teach like 4 or 5.
I would like to like ask a question to both of you, because I was just talking about this today with my boyfriend. Actually, I was talking about how I think I hate making generalizations, but a lot of women seem to collaborate more together in the yoga world. Like if you ever see yoga retreats, it's usually like 2 friends. A lot of them identify as women, and they'll always host a retreat together, but you don't often see like what Bradshaw and I do unless it's a couple, like a married couple together. And I often see, especially heterosexual men who teach yoga, I see them do retreats on their own. It's usually just their retreat, or it's like these 2 women do a retreat together. So I think collaboration, I don't know if this is like maybe a larger discussion that we don't have to dive into, but I think collaboration might be hard for heterosexual men. That's my thought.
I mean,
that was a great podcast.
I mean, all I would say to that is before I got into yoga, I was in sort of like a postmodern dance world, like contact improv kind of world. And I did have another male partner who we were collaborating and making all this work together. So I actually have had that in my life before, like, which I don't know that a lot of men do. I would say that you're kind of correct. I know that for myself, I was saying this to my wife not too long ago, that at a certain age, it feels, and I don't know if this is different for women, but it just feels really hard to like make new friends, like to make new close friends than it used to be. And it's like, the friends that I had at other times in my life, some of them I'm still in touch with and some of them I'm not. But like, even like, I tried to make some gestures to like some of the other dads that I met at pickup whose daughters were in my daughter's class or whatever. And it hasn't really gelled. It's not like I've actually met those friends. And maybe because you're also at a different stage in your life and you don't even have that much time for it necessarily. So I don't know. But in terms of collaboration, I think generally speaking, even among women, it's kind of rare that you find somebody, especially because a lot of it was about like finding your voice as a teacher. And then at some point, even in terms of like, if you were going to try to make a living at it, like the teacher is kind of the brand.
Totally.
Yeah, this is, I have so many thoughts because this is honestly something that Giana and I have been discussing personally a lot of like what this collaboration looks like, especially since I'm more of the face through social media of the brand. And it's really important for me and for Giana to people know that we are a team, that when you come on retreats, when you come to trainings, it's not just me, it's also her and just as much her. And, also, so we're like working through that of what that looks like on social media. Cause I think that's Giana goes back and forth and she does so much on the back end. She's like, I don't know if I don't want to make a reel. I don't, but I'm like, but people need to see your face. And it's kind of like the world that we're living in. So we can talk more about that, but that's definitely been on our plate that we have been discussing kind of ad nauseum in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I would also like to add that I think that it's really, really important to talk about conflicts. And Giana and I, through our tenure together, I've had many, many conflicts and not like, oh, I'm mad at you, like really big fights, about many things, personal stuff, retreat stuff, everything. And we've always come on the other side. And I think that's because we've also had the ability, which requires a lot of work, to say I was out of line, or like, let's meet back in the middle. Let's, we can have confrontation and also resolve. And that is essential in business.
Yeah.
Also,
people,
you could, oh, sorry, G.
No, I was going to say, people always say, don't work with friends, don't work with family. And I think I've taken those warnings, almost with a grain of salt, because I think something that Bradshaw and I have that he's talking about is just like a really strong foundation and really strong communication. Like, we both are able to take accountability. We're both able to compromise. We're both able to just like really sit with things and work through them and find something that, makes us both feel comfortable. And then also, like, we do have our own things. Like, at the end of the day, especially now, I just moved to San Francisco. Like, I'm here, he's there. So, there's his workshops, he's doing that on his own. And
which I actually think is better for our business that we're both in different cities, because we're pulling, it's like we both have our own, markets that we can kind of bring together into Kaya, which is again our retreats and our trainings and so forth. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a ride, but I think that the ability to move through conflict is huge. Huge.
I would say, if you're just listening to the podcast, the dynamic is way clearer. Like, just because you guys are super, because you're super transparent about it. Like, I know that you're the one who does a lot of all the admin stuff. In fact, did I hear correct, Giana, that you have a master's degree in admin? Did you say that? Is there such a thing as a master's? Or is it like, is it business administration, or is it just administration, period?
I feel like that sounds so boring if it's just administration, but not that this makes it any better. I have a master's of arts, and the actual degree is arts administration.
Oh, okay.
But wouldn't you say, Giana, that a lot of that stuff still relates to what we're doing?
It's arts administration and policy. Yeah. So for a long time before this, I was working both for the city of Chicago as a curator, and then before that in galleries, and I would plan festivals. So my planning skills in that world has totally transferred over.
I mean, I only say that because, and I do think it directly relates, because I do think like the career of an artist and the career of a yoga teacher have a lot of very close parallels. And I think one of the things that like bogged yoga teachers down once it became a profession was all the admin. like getting swamped with admin and being able to do the admin or know how to have a spreadsheet. I did not have a spreadsheet for the first 5-6 years out of 10 that I had a yoga center.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody I knew who I was working with who had more of a business mind was like, you're crazy. What do you mean you don't have a spreadsheet?
They're like, hey, Jay, how about payroll?
It just worked. You know what I mean? But the problem is it worked until it didn't work.
Yeah,
and when it wasn't working, if you don't have a spreadsheet, you have no way to really know what happened or make any kind of choices or try to figure anything out. You're kind of flying blind. That's what I learned.
I would also say that Giana, since she is so skilled in that way, has taught me so much. And it's been a challenging learning experience and a very rewarding one as well. And I think that's one of the reasons, Giana can speak to this more, why the collaboration works, is I think that we both have different skill sets. And I think that that's really helpful with collaboration. But I do think at the same time, as we become bigger and things become busier, as they really have in the past month or so, really, it's kind of wild how things have blown up in some ways for us, which is really exciting. But I don't want Giana just left in the background just doing admin. Do you know what I mean? Because she's an amazing yoga teacher and she's really focused on education. So now as we move and the business grows, what does that look like? Do we hire someone? We're trying to figure all that out.
Well, for whatever it's worth, as a sort of slightly more objective eye, I could kind of really gather very quickly that Bradshaw has a knack for doing these like Instagram reels.
Yes.
But you're the anchor in the podcast, and it seems like anybody who goes on any of your retreats or trainings would probably know that you play a big role and it isn't just admin, that you're just as much of a teacher there too. Like I kind of get that. And speaking of which, I have a little aside, and I don't know you very well, Bradshaw, and I normally wouldn't offer any unsolicited advice, but I feel like just from what I know of you from your show, you can take a little ribbing, because I noticed in getting ready to speak with you today that I was like, what's the deal with yellow tarantula-a9mg.squarespace.com as your web URL? Because I don't know if you're making a face like you don't know what I'm talking about. Like first one, your website doesn't have like a customized URL, or maybe it does and it's not directed properly. I don't know.
Oh, I got written. Yeah.
So wait. So here's the thing. I'm teasing you, but like, basically, I saw that and my first impulse was like, yeah, screw that. You don't need to pay to have some customized URL. It's your teaching that matters. And I was like, who cares? But then I'm also a little bit like of a web geek, like URL hoarder. So I went and looked, and I don't know if you're aware,
BradshawWish.com?
No, but BradshawWish.com is available. You could own it for $14.
I should do that right after this.
As soon as we're done, you got to go do it. Strangely enough,
this
Bradshaw Wish Yoga is not. I don't know if there's some other Bradshaw Wish.
I had it because I bought that domain. And then I let it all. Then I had this girl who was doing my website. Jay, I'm not an organizer, but I will. But here's what I want, though. Can I do this? Can I make it so if someone goes to BradshawWish.com, it goes right to Kaya?
Yeah, you just need to buy the domain.
If you have the domain, you can forward it to wherever you want. But I'm just saying, as a thing for me, I just had to laugh. Because John's got Johnny Yoga. She gobbled that up just like Jason Crandall got Jason Yoga. I was like, that was a score. But I was like, Bradshaw's got to get it together on his URL.
I have my name and I have Giana Yoga.
I thought you were going to say something so much more controversial than that. So that's the fact. I'm like, oh, thank God. Yeah. I'm like, oh, don't have a URL. Whatever.
But you know what, Jay? I've been trying to tell him to edit his website for a long time, and there's just only so much I could manage. I'm like, I can't do your personal website too.
No. The thing is that I honestly, and this is more on like my mental space and well-being, like, I have horrible, really bad, and Giana's gonna be like, I know, but ADHD. I have really bad ADHD. So like that, sitting down and doing tasks like that for me is like pulling teeth, even though it takes 2 seconds.
Usually he calls me up and makes me stay on the phone with him while he goes and buy his domain. So I'm sure we're going to be doing that after this recording. He's like, hey, how do I buy my domain?
I get it. And it's the part of being a yoga teacher that isn't the yoga part also. It's like all these other hats that I've developed, and I'm kind of good at some of them now, but they're different hats. And so I get
Yeah.
that you're not interested. I'm teasing, really.
Yeah, no. But Giana, the reason that I'm doing the reels is because of like she had to pull my teeth to start doing the reels.
Well, you're funny and they're good, and that's why I think it's caught on and people have taken some notice. I guess I'm kind of curious to go back to what brought you together. So you didn't know each other at all in Chicago. Really? Oh, you did, but you didn't. And then you both independently decided to do this training in San Francisco, which is on the other side of the country. What was it, like a month-long program, or did you go for like module weekends? How did it run?
Yeah. Can I speak to this a little bit, Bradshaw? So Bradshaw had signed up for it before me. And so I knew he was already in the program. And I already knew he was in that. But then Jason came to Chicago and he did a week-long sequencing workshop at Yoga View. So I always whenever we have like established teachers in town, I would always go to those workshops. So I took Jason's sequencing workshop and I loved it. And I had already done a 300-hour before this. So I wasn't necessarily looking for more training, but I loved Jason's workshop so much that I was like, maybe I'll do his 300-hour also. And so I actually did ask Bradshaw about it. And I was like, hey, I know you've already started it. Do you think it's worth it or not? And whatever. And so Bradshaw was like, yeah, you should do it. So we knew we were going to be there at the same time for the next module. But the way Jason did it back then was 3 in-person modules. They're 2 weeks. So it'd be like a Monday through Saturday. You get Sunday off and then you do it again the next 2 weeks, Monday through Saturday. And it's a full day training from 9 to 5 essentially. And then the pandemic hit and interrupted that. And so
you were in the middle of it when the pandemic hit.
Yeah. And so we had to finish online, both of us. But the module that we were in was February 2020 to the beginning of March 2020. So you can, just get a pulse for the climate then. So Bradshaw and I think I got back like March 10th. I maybe went back to studios for like 2 or 3 days. And then Chicago was already locked down by like right before St. Patty's Day. My studios had all gone into lockdown. So we had just, we're riding this high of this training, like eager to bring in all these new teachings into our teachings. And then all of a sudden the world just kind of stops and everything's taken onto the virtual, platforms that Chicago was locked down for a long time. I taught virtually almost exclusively for 2 years, actually. Yeah. And
me too.
Bradshaw was teaching at a studio at the time that was exempt from a lot of the lockdown mandates because they had garage doors. So they would get to open the garage doors and literally people would practice in January, like 0 degrees in their winter coats, just because they could be in person gathering. It was one of the few spots in town that allowed that. And then eventually he actually really helped me out. He helped me get a job at that studio so that, I can be in person again, because I was going crazy with just the virtual. Not just that, but studios were cutting our pay, we were losing our schedules, our classes, all that stuff. But it really brought him and I together because of that experience in San Francisco. And while I saw the rest of my schedule sort of slipping away from me and my income slipping away from me, I sort of just took things into my own hands. I was like, well, you know what? If everything's going to be virtual, we don't need studios anymore. We can be our own studios and I'm going to create my own school. And so I just got to writing a 200-hour and I wanted to include a lot of the anatomy stuff that we were learning from Jason. And I brought in, I basically just asked Bradshaw, hey, do you want to do it with me? Like I'm going to write it all.
That was going to be my question. Like when was there like maybe even before you thinking to ask him, was there some sort of bonding moment that made you think, oh, I'll ask Bradshaw to make our own studio online, our own online thing?
Look at me, Jay. Wouldn't you want this?
I'm curious about you wanting to work with her as well, but you were talking, Giana. So like, was there a moment during the training or something, like a bonding moment you had that?
I think we just knew, or at least for me, I knew that I got along with you and we could laugh a lot. Like we have a very similar perspective on we believe in, the power and magic of yoga, but we also don't take ourselves so seriously. Like, I think if I were to partner with someone who was like a bhakti yoga practitioner, it just wouldn't be as good of a fit. No disrespect to that, but I didn't want the overtly like dogmatic or spiritual type of part. I wanted someone who I felt like has elements of all these things. You can get into the philosophy, you could get into the anatomy, you could get into like the deeper history, but you could also be really technically skilled and update your alignment. And, just, I thought that we vibed on all of that. And I also knew that we had a good time together. And then I think if I'm being really real, I also knew that like Bradshaw's a really likable person. He's hilarious. And I was like, I could make this happen and he could get people in the door. And I think vice versa. I think he thought the same thing, is like, I can get the people, but she can create this platform for me. So I think we kind of, for lack of a better word, like used each other to an extent for a mutual benefit. And throughout that, it really has, we've developed a really beautiful friendship from it.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
like when she comes up to you, Bradshaw, and she's like, do you want to start a yoga? What did she say? You want to start an online yoga? She's like, I think that
school? we should do a 200-hour training. And I'm like, I'm not writing a fucking training. So I was like, yeah, okay. And then I was like, yeah, I was like, sure. I was like, what? Yeah, sure. I really like you. But I wasn't thinking that she would actually commit to putting the content together. And then like a week later, she sends me like this extremely well thought out, put together manual. And I was like, oh.
It was lockdown. I was working on it like manically, but it was not a week. It was probably I took like a good month to write it, but I would show him like drafts week to week.
And I was like, wow, this is so unbelievably impressive. Just the quality of what she was putting together, the research, the aesthetic. I was like, this is the best thing I've seen. This is the best 200-hour I've seen, in terms of a manual. And I've seen quite a few. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I was way more inclined to be like, yeah, we're definitely going to do this for sure.
Okay, so when you start working together, it starts with the 200-hour training, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're both teaching in-person classes too in Chicago? Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
Our first training was in 2021. I think we started January 2021. So I started writing it, I want to say in August, got it approved by Yoga Alliance by October. And then we ran it in January. So it was pretty like short. It was quick. And by that time, I was still teaching virtually. And then I think actually at the same time we started our training, Bradshaw's, when you brought me into that studio that I'm not naming names. But so I did start working at one studio in person. And at the time, how many studios were you in person versus virtual? Do you remember?
2.
Probably 2. Okay. Yeah, it was really slow to open back up. I think as I'm reminiscing.
But I was also going to the studio and they were like, sometimes there would be no one there, but I'd be teaching in the studio. Like I would go to the studio
studio online.
Live stream.
Well, I guess that's my question. Like did you guys have email lists? Like what student base, like if you're starting out to do your own thing and you're starting your own teacher training and you're not affiliated with some lineage tradition or some particular center, you're just some rogue independent yoga teachers out there doing your thing, which is what most of us are doing.
Yeah.
What were you drawing upon for that first training?
Well, I've been teaching in the city and Giana had been teaching in the city for so many years. So we had a lot of, and everyone was online. So and I was one thing I think I was really good at when Instagram started coming around, to be like I would say, follow me on Instagram to ad nauseum. And I know that that's for some teachers, they feel like that's cringe, but I'm like, that's where to find me. Like that's how you know what's going on. So a lot of people found me and Giana through Instagram, and that's how we promoted it, and that's how we got like 20 something people.
Well, I had
and you had an email list.
I always had an email list, and I'm like old school. I will like bring I'll bring my like legal pad at the back of the room and say, hey, I've got this notebook there if you want to be on my email list. And I've just always done that because since I started teaching yoga, I've always had I hate to say this, but like some sort of like entrepreneurial spirit where I was like, I know I want to do events and stuff. And so back in the day, I was teaching in South Florida and I would run these, like my brother has an organic farm and it has this second floor tiki. So I used to just like collect emails, invite people to do yoga on the farm. I would give them farm tours, whatever. I always had some sort of like side
Entrepreneurial,
hustle,
yeah.
side hustle. And
But also, I feel like that runs in your family, Giana. Your sister's
That's
the same
retreats.
way.
You were organizing retreats.
Yeah, I was doing like day retreats before I even knew what that was. And I think that this is just a larger reflection on how I am as a person. Like, I feel like opportunities haven't come easy to me. And instead of like trying to break down doors, I'm like, whatever, they don't want me. I'm just going to create my own. And that's been like a really big theme. It was what I did in my art career, and it's what I've done essentially with Kaya. And so now our email list has grown. And as soon as we started Kaya, like Bradshaw's never had an email list, which I wish you did, but now Kaya has been the main email list. Like, we're collecting emails like crazy. And I try to keep up, our newsletter campaigns, but Instagram was a big thing. Like, when we locked down, I had some people that just found me. Like, I used to teach a lot of corporate yoga. I used to teach at these one-off events and stuff, and people would just find me on Instagram and be like, hey, I miss your classes. Where can I find you? And then I just started doing my own Zooms, like a donation-based Zoom during that time too. So a lot of those people who had followed me from, the beginning of lockdown March to basically December 2020, those all became really solid contacts that again, like, rolled into our student base.
Yeah, I think a lot of yoga teachers had that same kind of experience of at the beginning of pandemic doing online classes from their living room through the auspices of a particular center they were teaching at.
Yeah.
But that at a certain point, the centers were super struggling depending on their landlords and their leases, and all that stuff was happening. And at some point, people started to realize, like, actually, you know what? I know 5 people in my life who want to do yoga with me every week, and I can have a Zoom account, and they can all pay me $10, and I can make way more money off those 5 people than I was off the 30 people who were coming. And so they kind of were like, oh, I can build my own sort of platform. I kind of had already done that before the pandemic, only because I met someone who was smart enough to tell me that was a good idea to do that. And it's interesting also, just in terms of, I guess I'm kind of curious about this. Before the pandemic, you both were teaching before you went to do that training with Jason. Were you making your living teaching at that point, or did you have other resources or way to pay your rent?
I always made my living from teaching as soon as I started teaching. So 13 years. And then Giana, you've gone in and out of teaching.
I've gone in and out of being full-time. My first 4 years of teaching, I was living in South Florida. I was full-time, and that's what I told you about. I was doing my day retreats on the farm and whatever. And then when I moved back to Chicago in 2019, I took a job with the city curating, and I was working 20 hours a week for the city, but I was teaching 12 classes a week. And I thought I was a part-time teacher. I literally thought that 12 classes a week was not a full schedule. It's like, oh, I could be teaching 25. But I think also this is like, I guess I really over glorified busyness. And I think I was in a really burnt out state where I just wasn't dealing with a lot of other stuff. I always kept myself busy. And now I'm at 10 classes and I'm tired. I'm like, and I'm a full-time teacher. I'm like, I can't do that anymore. But yeah, when things... Sorry, I was just going to add on when things did open up more, like mask mandates were lifted, I think in March 2022 in Chicago. Then I went full speed. I started teaching 25 classes a week. I was like, okay, well, I'm not working for the city anymore. I've got to do this. And then, like, after working that way in 2022, going from like the lockdown version of the schedule to this, I completely burnt out. And I honestly feel like I'm still picking up the pieces from the burnout back, basically from start of 2023.
I guess I'm intrigued by the idea that there was that many opportunities coming out of the pandemic that you could have 25 classes a week.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember that we live in Chicago, so it's like
so
there's so many studios.
There's so many opportunities to teach.
I was teaching 8 classes just at this at a new gym that had opened up that year. So that filled up my schedule. They brought me on as one of their lead teachers, gave me 8 classes. And then the studio that he and I both worked at, I was at like 7 classes there. And then I taught corporates. So it was mainly, there was always a little bit of hustle because you can make more money teaching corporates and private lessons. So the rest of that 25 was a mixture of, well, there was one other small studio and then a bunch of corporates and privates.
Yeah,
I would also... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say that like Giana and I are now in the space of like being in this, full-time teacher class after class after class after class after class, where we're like finally with like the retreats and stuff, like maybe we don't have to live like this.
I mean, that's kind of where I'm going. Because I looked and I saw that it's still correct. I don't know if your website needs to be updated, but it said like 16 classes a week on your schedule, Bradshaw. And I
teach 15 classes a week. Yeah.
I mean,
wait, so the website worked?
Yeah, it did. I found it.
It's just not bradshawwish.com. It's like the entire, it's probably
it's literally yellow tarantula -a9mg.squarespace.com. That's the URL.
It's the Squarespace like standard. If you don't,
I probably just need to go to Squarespace and buy the domain.
You probably just need to point it to it, but
whatever.
It doesn't matter.
Whatever. We're not talking about that. I was
taking note of your current schedules, and I guess where I'm kind of going is I've been having a bunch of conversations. This is happening in the context of like maybe 4 others that I'm having of like where we are now in 2025 and if it's possible for people to make a living, because it seems a lot harder to make a living now than it did in 2019. And I guess
I think it's definitely harder.
It's harder. Rent's gone up. Everything's gone up. And you know what hasn't gone up?
And everyone's a fucking yoga teacher.
Everyone's a yoga teacher. The cost of living has gone up, but somehow, some way, the price that people, I don't know, like people, the yoga pay has not gone up. Like the pay in 2025 is still the same as it was in 2019.
Okay, so in 2019, were you getting straight fees or were you getting paid per attendance?
Mixture.
Like a base rate and then a per student kind of thing on top of that or something?
Oh my goodness. I actually had this one studio I worked at for way too long where it was only a per head. So if I had 0 people show up, I made nothing. And I would pay like $5 for the train and lose money getting there. So ideally, I try to fight for a base rate always. I think that's the most fair base rate than a per head. But I think in Chicago, it's much more common to just get a flat base rate. And I'm learning this now moving to San Francisco. The per head seems to be standard here. It's usually a base rate plus a per head here.
I mean, I like to hear that because in a way, some kind of base rate, so you don't end up having to pay to get there if no one comes kind of thing makes sense. But the idea that, I mean, for me, I'm not doing memberships or other things, so it can become a very clean revenue share between the sender and the teacher because you know exactly how much money is coming in per class, Yeah. And you can make it fair. It feels more fair and supportive of the teacher in a way. But at the same time, when you have those corporate gigs, it's like $100 a pop because it's part of the HR budget, even if nobody shows up.
It's more than that.
Jay, it's more than that.
That's what it was back when I was doing the corporate gigs. I haven't been done in a long time.
$250 if you're in a city. Don't take any less.
But I think,
you heard it here, y'all.
Yeah, exactly. Giana, don't be giving away the secrets. We have to gatekeep everything.
No. I actually want to give away these teachers because if we don't, then there's always going to be someone to swoop in and teach for $30. Stop teaching for $30.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the corporation that you're doing it for. Like, they're not always the greatest gigs because that kind of money has like a backlash effect because you like depend on it, but then like people are there on their lunch breaks and it's like they're horrible corporate jobs. You know what I mean? I just had all these experiences. I think they're good gigs, and it's interesting to hear that the rate has gone up that much because corporations are the only entities that have money these days. So it makes sense that it would.
Yeah, I also think that like with those gigs too, depending on how the budget changes, you'd be like, I've been making an extra $800 for 2 years every month from this class. And then they're like, we're gone. It's gone. We're not doing that anymore. And that happened to me with all of my clients.
If you have, like, it reminds me of that show. I keep forgetting the name of it about advertising, where it's like if you have the one lucky strike customer, like if you have that one celebrity private student or that one corporate gig that you really become such an integral part of your income, and then they just decide for whatever reason to go away, you're kind of screwed. It was all wrapped up in that one gig, and you kind of want to have it be more spread out so you're not relying on just one gig.
Exactly.
Honestly, everything has to be diversified. Even, not to like get into the whole TikTok ban, but look what happened there. Like all these people who are just like TikTok influencers for a week leading up to it, thinking they're losing their income because it's being taken away from them. So I think, it's a part of, in arts admin, we call it resiliency thinking, where you always have to like plan for the unplanned and have something to fall back on. And goes back to what I was saying, is like creating the something out of nothing. Because if it all goes away, you need to be resourceful and figure out, how you're going to pay for your groceries and whatnot.
I also think that Giana's Giana is amazing at creating opportunities, and it is such a creative mind in creating. So I think with like the retreats, and we're actually in the process of doing a teacher's retreat. So a yoga teacher retreat just for yoga teachers that Giana and I will be leading. And we had a friend that had taught, our friend Pedro talked about this, and we were like, hey, we may do this idea too. Like, do you mind if we like do this as well? And whatever. We had a long conversation with him because we didn't want to, think like we were stealing this idea.
I don't like when people steal ideas or swoop in. Like, I just think that's dirty business. I was like, hey, I loved this idea. Like, do you care if we do it? And honestly, and Pedro, if you're listening, Pedro Luna, he's he's
been on the show before. I remember.
Okay,
Pedro.
you know Pedro.
Yeah.
Luna.
We love him.
So Pedro and I, fun fact, we're in our 200 hour together at the same time. So it's a small web here, the yoga world, and that was in South Florida. But yeah, so he talked about doing that, and he's like, it's okay. I stole your format for your 300-hour program, so we're even. And then he's like, actually, let's get on a meeting. Let's pick brains about it. And
he's great.
Yeah.
But when we, we had this idea and we put it out there, we just were gauging some interest on Instagram, and we got like hundreds of emails, and we were like, wow, this is like, Gianna and I put in so much effort, and like we have been trying to like bang down the doors and like, we're going to make this work. Like, we're going to make this a living. And sometimes you feel like it's never going to happen. And I feel like now we're finally at this like reality where it could be a reality. We could just do 6 trainings a year or 4 retreats and just teach 5 classes a week. But it's taken fucking 13 years of teaching 15 to 20 classes a week to get there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I think people see the Instagram and stuff and they're like, oh, you guys blew up overnight. It's like, we've been teaching for years and years and years and years and years of teaching and
then also,
hundreds
like,
of classes.
And at least like 4 years now of like really trying to infiltrate like the algorithm on Instagram. It didn't just happen overnight. It's like, slow.
Well, when does the podcast come into play? You guys have been doing that for like how many years now? A couple years, right? We started
it in 2023. So February 2023. That happened, honestly.
Can I just say one thing, Giana? I just signed into my GoDaddy account, and I just have to pay. I just want everyone to know.
You're going to do it on the podcast right now?
I know. I was checking. I was checking really quick, and I was like, fuck, all I had to do was sign in. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so I'll try to make this like long story short-ish. I wound up in January 2023 getting COVID, and I had it really bad. Like, I had some sort of reaction to it where like my muscles and my joints were really achy for months. But I think it was a culmination of, I told you I was teaching those 25 classes. I think it was like burnout and COVID all at once, where like it's like I got a moment to relax, and that like exhale just made me completely fall apart. I was like, I was having like autoimmune stuff. And in that, I was like, okay, I can't work as much as I have been working. I'm like burning the wick at both ends. And because I had such an issue with just staying still and not being a part of the yoga world, I was like, okay, I'm going to make a yoga podcast. So like, as I was like, actually literally, I was on like a nebulizer, like signing up for ACAST. I'm not kidding.
Yes.
I really was. I was on like so many steroids. It was ridiculous. But I was like, I was actually going to start the podcast with a different friend if we're really reminiscing. And that friend
Thank God you didn't. Thank God you didn't.
Well, here's the thing. The reason why I didn't approach you about you with it is because I just didn't think you would commit, because it would require weekly meetings. It's like, he's never going to do that. It was hard enough. I had worked with him at this point for 3 years on the teacher training and retreats that I was like, it's going to be too hard to nail him down every week. And it's like, I'm already micromanaging you so much. I didn't want to add to your plate. And then I kind of pitched it to him as like, I'm going to do this podcast alone. And every once in a while, if you want to hop on, like, I think it would be really fun. And then from the get-go, he's like, no, I like this. I'm doing it with you every week. I'm like, okay, cool.
Well, I mean, I can kind of guess why that might have been, Bradshaw, why you took to podcasting. I know why I did, like the longer form. And if you're not someone who's likes to write all your thoughts down carefully, but you're somebody who finds your ideas through speaking in an improvisatory way, which it is my impression you are, podcasting's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, podcasting has been amazing. And also the best thing about podcasting with Giana is like people see our dynamic. And so it's making like people are like, as you know, Jay, it's a slow roll, but now we're like, every couple days or every day getting like, messages to our Instagram being like, I love your dynamic. I love your vibe. I want to come to a training. I want to come to a retreat. Like, it's just been a wonderful, because if people are going to come, there was actually the two people that came, a couple, they were fantastic. That we love them so much. They came on this last retreat and they only knew us from the podcast. And Giana's like, well, we've never met them. I was like, at least they know who we are and what our energy is like from the podcast. Because like the way we are talking on the podcast is how we are in person. So it's nice to be able to get people from the podcast and like have them kind of come into the world of our retreats and our trainings. And it's been awesome. It's been really fun.
How many well, go ahead. What were you going to say, Giana?
I was going to say, well, like most of our signups have always been our students that we know in real life. So we know that they like our teaching. So that was the element I was concerned with. Like, we know that podcast listeners like us as personalities, but what if they don't like our yoga classes? Like, we might be really entertaining or whatnot, but we're not like I know we're not going to be the teachers for everyone, but I do think it's really important that they know our dynamic and they can get a feel for the type of class we lead. It's not going to be like I was saying, we're not going to be playing the harmonium and like chanting to Shiva, at least not I am. But I think in the very beginning of podcasting, I was really concerned with like having this like polished image where I would always be editing things. And I very briefly, maybe for 2 episodes, tried to write notes before we podcast of like all the points. And I think Bradshaw's taught me a lot because like he never read the notes I sent him. I was like, did you read the notes about what he's like? And he would lie. He'd be like, yeah. I'm like, no, you didn't. And then it'd be like so off the cuff. And I remember in like the second episode we ever did, maybe the third episode, he just starts talking about gonorrhea, Jay. And I was like, I'm like sitting here at the time we didn't post any clips. And I'm like, shut up. I'm like giving him the eyes. I'm like, why are you talking about gonorrhea? And then I would spend so much time editing out all of these little things. And it was partially, this is like his humor. We have a funny dynamic. And if that was just a conversation with us, like it would be nothing. But I'm like, no, this is what we're putting out into the world. And I was really obsessed with that image until I realized that
that's what people were coming back for.
People kept commenting like, we love how real you are. We love these off the cuff, tangents. We love the dynamic. Like even when I have to like yell at him to get back on track, like, so I was like, okay, I just need to let this be as authentic as possible. I can't be micromanaging this image. And I think ever since I sort of let loosen the reins on that, we've seen a lot more success.
Well, I also think that you've done a good job too. When I am sometimes going too off the rails, like, okay, she's great to podcast. If it was 2 of us, 2 of me, it would be insane. Nothing would ever get done. So like to have her kind of like, she knows me so well. She can always kind of bring me back to,
like, okay, enough about gonorrhea. Let's talk about retreats.
And I actually got a message like yesterday about the podcast. And I've gotten a couple of these very similar messages, which really like all jokes aside, like warm my heart, because people have said, in different ways, like you guys are really, really funny, but there's also like an educational aspect. And there's also like, we talk a lot about grief and death. Like we have deeper conversations, a lot of like things about relationships. And it's not just funny. Like the funny is, I think, what brings a lot of people in. And I think it's a great part of who we are and what we offer, but that we're offering a couple different things, yoga education, a sense of lightheartedness and fun, some depth in terms of relationships and like it isn't just one thing. And so when I hear that feedback, because for Giana and I, that's always been the goal. We don't want it to be a gimmick. And I don't want to be a gimmick, but and that can kind of be really hard using things like Instagram, because people can see you in just one little square. And so the podcast, I feel like, has given us the ability to show different sides of who we are as people and as teachers and as educators. And I think that's why it's been such a wonderful form.
Yeah, I think that I would consider like your Instagram reels like their own thing in a way. Like it's their own thing, and it does point people to the podcast and to other things that you do. And that's why it's probably effective, because the style of what you're doing, the joking around, like, because they're insider yoga jokes. Like Pedro's a good example. He did a similar thing with yoga memes.
So funny.
You know what I'm saying? Where he would just like tap into like sentiments that yoga teachers would totally laugh about, and you're doing it in a really free way that not everybody can. So like that's its own thing. But I think you both are really onto something about podcasting that I've certainly discovered, that there's different styles of podcasting, just like different styles of yoga. And some people like are scripting things out a lot more, or like having pre-interviews with their guests and kind of talking about what they're going to talk about beforehand. So things are a little bit more polished and you kind of know what's going to happen a little bit more. And those can still be really great and full of all kinds of stuff. But then there's the like a little bit more like, I think, spirit of podcasting, where things aren't so planned and they are sort of free form, and you're looking to see if you can share a certain kind of authenticity or like vulnerability that sometimes isn't what you're supposed to put out as your forward facing thing,
Totally.
Like, especially like I said earlier, like when you're the brand, you're supposed to be like showing this like successful image of yourself or something, not like crying about how much pain you have or something on the mic. Right. But the reality is that letting that go, I did the same thing. It really did allow people to kind of connect to me in a different way, because I was opening up myself to people through this medium. I do think you can go too far and be a little bit too reckless. I certainly have been from time to time, where like, I'll even give you an example. I used to record my intros like kind of like late at night, like up against it, like it needs to be out. I need to have it done by tomorrow morning, and it's like midnight, and I'm like, oh fuck, like I left it to too long, and I'd be super tired, and then I would just like go on these rants and like be in this kind of state, too tired, and then I realized like, dude, you got to do it in the morning or in the daytime where your mind's clear and you're not going to ramble off on all this crap and then get yourself into trouble. I mean, it is interesting, though, to model like learning in public as well. And I think that is something that people really appreciate, that if you don't hide all your blemishes. Yeah. People are like, oh, right, me too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you know what I imagine, Jay, and it's one of the reasons behind like your weekly meetings with your podcast group or your teacher group. I think that desire for connection is also at the heart of our podcast too. Because I think for a really long time, before my friendship with Bradshaw, I was like, we're all these little like satellites moving on our own. And I felt like I was just like dropping into a studio and leaving, dropping in, leaving. And especially when I was working in South Florida, we had to open and close the studio so that I wasn't seeing any other like desk person or staff. And just hard to make connections there. Like you talk about making friends at a certain age. I'm like, well, I don't feel like I'm making friends at the studio because I'm like the teacher, And so I wanted like that water cooler moment with a colleague. And I felt like that's what, we created. And Bradshaw and I would have these conversations offline. I'd call him up and I'd be like,
yeah, seriously.
Hey, guess what happened to me? This was the craziest thing. I was teaching and then this random man came in and like, and I was like, this is like so relatable. People who are doing this over and over week to week, like they can, not feel as alone or like these little, moving satellites. So I think it's created a space in that sector as well. When you talk about like the business of it all and like the actual, like the job, because at the end of the day, it's a job.
I know, it's an interesting thing. I was just talking about that, of how it's a job, and then it's also like a business, and then it's also like your soul's design.
Yeah, but like it shouldn't be a business, and like
your
you shouldn't be making money.
Practice,
Yeah, but you should,
potentially it's like all of these things at the same time, which aren't always all the same thing at the same time.
Totally, it's very strange.
It's a very, very strange thing. Yeah, and I remember this is years ago. I did a little kind of like storytelling event, and I invited a bunch of my yoga teacher friends, and I just told stories about teaching yoga. I don't know if you knew this, Giana.
No, I don't know this.
Yeah, and it was just all funny teaching stories, and it went so well. And I think that like that's like this is kind of I think where we found a little sweet spot with the yoga community is like, again, we are not saying that this is something flippant or not to take serious or not to,
not at all.
but we are saying, let's laugh a little bit because everyone is so tight. And it's like you can be spiritual and deep and connected to your yoga practice and still enjoy yourself and still laugh and still be playful. And this world right now is such a fucking mess in so many ways that like just having some time to like shoot the shit and laugh, we need that. We are built like that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what like for me, so much of yoga is. It's community, it's connecting, it's going into a room with people who I would never end up going somewhere else with and talking and like the little conversations before and after class and connecting with other teachers. Like we need that. I really, I think that is sometimes where I have my most spiritual, my most connected moments. So I'll get off my soapbox.
And I'd like to think, I think I softened you to those moments too, because you were definitely an in and out type of person. Now you're like,
what do you mean in and out?
In and out with your yoga classes. Go in, teach, leave. Like I think like I've softened you.
Now I stay for 1 minute.
Well, that's an interesting thing because I know that when I had the center in Brooklyn for 10 years, like so much of what I did was just like hang out after class at the desk and people would chat with me and talk to me. And there was like so much exchange that happened. But it has changed quite a bit, especially as like class times have gotten shorter because people's lives were different and we got moved towards like the 60-minute classes, or even like some of the centers would like, you wouldn't even have like a lot of space in between classes. So you actually had to get out of the room for the next class coming in. And then I think nowadays, honestly, when we went online, at a certain point, I was doing so much Zoom chatting, and there was like all these opportunities. If you want to come hang out with me in my teacher Sangha and talk about whatever, or like you want to come to the community meetings, we have those. But for me to do it with every Zoom meeting was just too much. So I did kind of at a certain point kind of set a boundary and be like, okay, y'all, if you want to come to the meeting later, I'll see you later. And like, bye, like just kind of have to cut it a little bit. But here in my in-person classes, I certainly have been inviting that more because I do think that there's something to that relationship building, which, is traditionally how you would get the people who were going to come on your retreats, right?
But
I guess people connecting to you on the podcast to come to the retreat is different than people connecting with you from talking with you after class.
Yeah.
What's the spread like? Especially since you moved recently, like how many of the people who are signing up for your retreats are people that you've met from your in-person drop-in classes, and how many of them are coming from podcast listeners?
It's real easy. We've just started getting people from our podcast. So like we just did this retreat where we had a couple. That's it. Shout out Tara and Satya.
Nice.
Satya. Yeah. So they're the first podcast listeners, and we let them know that that
it was actually
they have that coveted.
It's cool.
Spot.
I remember the first time people started coming to my workshops just from knowing me from the podcast. It's a thing. That's cool. And they really know you because you share. They like listen to you.
And you know what, Jay? We were recognized in San Juan del Sur, Nicaragua. We were in town the day before our retreat. We were buying some snacks and stuff, some fruit.
We were fucked up. We were drinking.
No, we weren't. No, we weren't. We were literally had like bags of fruit. And I was talking to Bradshaw. We're like, what shuttle do we get on? And all of a sudden someone turned around and was like, Giana? Bradshaw? And I was like, who is this person? And they're like, I love your podcast. I'm like, oh my God, people know us. It's so weird for me to think that way. I think it happens to Bradshaw all the time because he has a larger Instagram following, and he also is very recognizable with all his tattoos and just you look at him. Anyway, I was like, wait, someone recognizes me? That was weird.
I think that was also really good for but I think that was good for you too, Giana, because I think that like again, what kind of going back to the beginning of our conversation is like, we work together. We are a collaboration. It's not just me, it's us. And so like, I want people to think about Kaya Yoga School, our trainings, our programming, our retreats as Giana and Bradshaw. You know?
Also, I think it's good to see, because, you can read numbers on a screen about your stats and stuff, but sometimes it doesn't feel real. I'm like, are people like when you look at
some of them
streams,
aren't real, but some of them, I know what you mean.
Right?
Yes.
Like, I don't know. Like, and then it's also different. Like, I look at our stats on Acast versus if I just log into Apple or Spotify, and it's like, wait, something is a little bit off. Like, what's the real number? And so it's nice to just see the in-person connection, and like, even every time. Yeah, even every time we are, we have students in person that we know, when they know about our personal lives, I'm like, oh yeah, we have a podcast. Like, oh yeah, you're listening. Like, more about me than I think you do. And I think that's also helped with our retreat signups. It's just like they are more comfortable traveling with us because they get more of a sense for us beyond like the 60-minute yoga class. And now oh, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. We'll finish what you were going to say.
I was just saying, now that I've moved, like Bradshaw was saying, like we only had like one spot left for Nicaragua when I moved here, but I filled it with someone from San Francisco. And I was like, oh, okay. So we're getting a mixture of people from different places.
I mean, that's really cool. I guess I'm kind of curious about that. I don't know a lot of people who have like money to go on retreats. So I guess I'm curious about that. Is there like a sort of demographic of people that are coming to your class that have some money laying around or jobs that would allow them to go on these retreats? Or like, I don't know, what do you attribute the ability to get a group like that together? Because that's the challenge, to like get enough of a group together to make it work. Do you have minimums where if you didn't get that amount, you would cancel?
Yes. Yeah, I would like to just say something about the finance of it all. Like, we definitely will work with people with payment plans. So a lot of times these trips are booked so far in advance. Like, we had our Italy retreat that's coming up. We had it booked a year and a half out. So we've had people giving us installments. And I think that makes it more accessible. But also, like, now that I'm in San Francisco, there's some deeper pockets. And like, people are like, here, let's just, I'm going to pay up front. Sure. And then also we attract eclectic crowds. We've got people who have, people financing their lives in certain ways. We have people that are, that just from all over, all walks of life. Yeah.
I guess
people got money.
I guess I'm asking that only because I'm thinking about this question, and I guess I don't know if you guys are comfortable. I don't know how old you are. I'm terrible at like guessing people's age.
I'm 36, Jay.
Okay.
I just turned 36, and
I would have guessed 30s. That was like what I would have guessed, that you guys were in your 30s.
Thank you, Jay.
I'm 38. So
okay,
yeah.
So all right. Well, so that's it. So you guys aren't in your 20s trying to build from scratch. You know what I mean?
I never want to go back to my 20s. My 20s was terrible, Jay.
I guess I'm just saying, do you think, because I keep saying, I don't think someone who's like in their 20s becoming a teacher now, like when I became a teacher in my 20s, could do what I did now. Do you think that someone 20 coming in could do what you did now? Probably not, because you started on the other side of the pandemic too.
Right? Yeah, you know what? I think that this is a good age though, because actually this past retreat, we had a lot of people in their 30s, maybe just a few in their 20s and 40s. But I think this is a good age because we're still cool in a sense.
You're
to
not
the
locked down with kids totally yet necessarily. Yes, I totally know what you mean.
That's never happening for me. At least.
The 20-year-olds still sort of think we're cool. And then like we also have like some retirees who are like, who
think we're
at least respect us enough to travel with us.
Respect us enough.
I guess the only thing I'm also curious about is that in my time of when I have done collaborations, like, and there's money involved, like your communication seems to me to be pretty key. Like even I had a business partner for a lot of years, and we had a straight 50-50 split that worked on a lot of levels for a long time until it started to not feel like a fair split. And then it got stickier. And we did manage to kind of like part ways, I think, in a friendly, respectful way. And I still have love in my heart, but it's hard to kind of do that. And I guess I'm I don't know. I'm curious about how I imagine you have to have those kind of conversations, be able to have those kind of conversations so that both of you feel like you're getting, one person's not doing more work than they're getting compensated for.
Well, Giana gets paid. I'll just be honest. Giana gets paid more because she does more admin. So there's a percentage. It's not 50-50. There's a certain percentage that she gets that I don't, because I don't want to do the admin. So, and I have no problem. Like, she's doing more work than I am. Like, that's just the fact. So it's just like, I would much rather be like, I consider myself, I mean, Giana maybe can speak to this, but I think that we're both pretty fair people. I don't think that she and I are greedy people. I mean, I love to make a dollar. Who doesn't? But I'm not going to, like, break a relationship over whatever the percentage is, if it's working. And it's like, okay, well, you're doing more work. This is evident and obvious. Here's X, Y, and Z. Where is this fair? How can we make this fair?
Yeah.
So, but we talk about that all the time. We're always talking about money.
And it's like, something that we might have to renegotiate as things change. And that's totally fine. Like, we'll approach those conversations as we get there. But in the very beginning, everything was 50-50. And then I was pouring all these hours into creating the platforms for us. And then, like, I was sort of getting resentful because we'd show up to a retreat that I spent a year planning, and Bradshaw gets to teach one class a day and then make 50-50. And I was like, wait a second, this doesn't feel right. Like, I just worked on this forever, all of the planning, all the communication. And then, the 50-50 part was we were splitting the classes. Like, he would do a morning class, I'd do the afternoon, or vice versa. And so I had to, like, feel the resentment and, like, not let it ruin anything. I had to just approach him and talk about it and just be like, hey, I don't want to resent working with you. Like, can we do anything about this? And I think that's what, the best parts about working with someone who has the capacity to just, like, put themselves in your shoes and, like, be fair and they're trustworthy, all that. Like, Bradshaw has those qualities. And so I think right then and there, if it hadn't been received that way, we would have probably never worked together again. But the fact that he was able to, like, be like, yeah, you are doing everything. Like, yeah, you should make more money. Like, it's just been,
I mean, that's what Bradshaw said earlier about the ability to, like, work through the conflict moments. That seems like a pretty big one, but that the two of you were able to communicate in a way and come to, like, a mutually agreed upon stance that you guys could both feel good about. That's what earns the relationship over time. You know what I mean? You have enough of those situations, you have more trust in that relationship and that your ability to work through those kinds of moments. And also, it's like, it's working. Like, it's it's working for me. It's working for Giana. I'm making, a living. She's making a living. But I think that the thing that's I'll just reiterate this again, is Giana and I are constantly talking. So it's like nothing gets to a point where it's like, okay, I've been thinking about this and I have resentment for the past 6 months of how you've done X, Y, and Z. It's a constant, like, we just don't communicate like that. Thank fucking God. We'll just like talk and talk and talk and talk and talk until there's a resolution.
Also, like, I don't want to get into this whole story, but, like, I think it takes a unique person to be able to have this type of relationship with, like, in a different scenario, we had brought on a chef. I'm going to just briefly tell this. My best friend my best friend since I'm 5 years old. Okay. My best girlfriend agreed to, like, do this for a certain budget, spent whatever she didn't spend in the budget was going to be her pay. She spent it all. So there's no pay. So whatever. But at the end of the retreat, I was like, let me offer her money. Like, she worked really, really hard. I offer her money. I'm like, as a best friend, you did me this favor. We're friends 30 something years. It destroyed our friendship. We don't talk anymore. I offered this out of, like, the goodness of my heart. I went into my own pocket, into Bradshaw's pocket to pull out money where it didn't exist because she blew the budget and be like, hey, it was $1,000. You're going to ruin our friendship over $1,000 because she didn't want me to give her a 1099. I was like, I have to. It's a business. We are a business.
Yes. Wow. That is.
And Giana, and, like, I literally. Yeah, Giana was like, "Oh, it's gonna be like we're gonna take $500." I was like, "Just take it. Like, who cares? Like, she did the work. Like, whatever. We're getting paid. Like, that's kind of how I operate. I'm like, whatever. Take the $500. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's 500 from him, 500 from me.
500 from me, which is also $500 though. $500 is nice.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. I mean, when you thought you were making nothing, I make 1,000.
Yeah.
What's a 1099? Like, just do it.
Yeah, that's a little bit strange that you would expect to not have to declare it if you're getting paid. But I mean, I guess there's times you could have probably found a way around that. But I hear you. It's best to kind of keep things above the boards. And the story is an important one. That's why I was sort of asking earlier about collaborations and people working together and how sometimes it's not that easy to do. It just takes two people who really want to. It's a relationship like any other. You know,
and Giana and I also have a relationship outside of business.
Yeah, that's clear.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, like we're very, very good friends outside of business. And I also think that, you know, can be a blessing. I think for us, it's hopefully still a blessing. And sometimes it, for other people, can be a curse. But, you know, we know each other's bullshit. That's true, too. Like when one of us are, you know, we know can be like, mm-hmm.
And I think that if one day, and I'm not manifesting this, Bradshaw, but if one day, like, just life takes turns and we no longer work together, like, I don't see it ever ruining our friendship. I at least hope not. I mean, Bradshaw, so he obviously has a lot of tattoos. The other day he said he thinks he's going to get a G tattooed on his hip for me. And I said, oh, that's really sweet. And if we're ever not friends one day, you can make it stand for something else. And he was like, why would you ever say that? I was like, do you ever think that way? I was like, and it was really sweet to hear. I was like, no, I guess I'm just like contingency planning. Like my brain's always
that's
like
literally
that,
how you work. You're like, well, if we're not friends in 2.5 years,
I was like, you know what? I was like, it could stand for gay.
Well, but I mean, you're thinking.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess that's an interesting question too, because your mind went to like a long-term. His is more of an immediate, like, oh, I want to signify this current relationship and dynamic that's so important in my life. I've got tattoos, and they were very much for me about the same thing. Certain thing happening in your life, certain relationship that's meaningful, and you kind of want to mark that on you. But I guess it's interesting. I'm thinking back to how you were talking about the retreats and how you've got it booked so far in advance. And it seems like it really does have to be that far in advance, doesn't it?
Have to. There's no other way.
And how much harder? Book up.
I guess my question is, how much harder is it to arrange the travel? Is it just me, or is it like finding flights, like you referenced, like no direct flights? Like,
ask Giana,
even just for myself,
no
it seems like way harder, and I'm more nervous, like my flight's not going to make it. And if I don't make that flight, then I can't get there on Friday to teach Saturday morning. Like it all feels way more stressful than it used to. Am I crazy or am I just paranoid?
No, it's definitely a concern. Like we always make sure to fly in earlier, so we're not like arriving with the group. We definitely spend a night or two before. But in terms of like the guests' flights, they're in charge of their own flights. I always give recommendations. Like, for example, this retreat in Nicaragua, it's 2.5 hours from the airport. So that ride there is really, it's long and it's expensive. So I just tell everyone, try to land, like buy your own flight, pick it, but land before 2 p.m. The shuttle will be leaving like at 4. If you miss it, then you have to do like a private cab. So that honestly is the most stressful. Is just like making sure people make
it's always just getting
shuttles.
People there.
I'm like, and
also we just finished this retreat, and I went back with some of our attendees, in like because they were on my flight. And let me just tell you, my job is not to get Mary Sue her boarding pass. I don't understand what these people are, what's going on. We have a friend, and we'll say that her name is Caitlin. We love you, Caitlin. We'll send this to her. She'll admit it. This has happened. We were there. Caitlin's Giana's very old friend. And
I was like, wait, what did she do? I don't even know.
No, nothing bad. Nothing. No, just I told you about this. So the boarding pass.
I thought that was she's Ellen.
Like, no. She's like, Bradshaw, do we need a boarding pass? And I go, Caitlin, is this your first fucking time flying out of the country? How the fuck we're in Costa Rica, in Liberia. Of course you need a fucking boarding pass. So she's like, well, I can usually get it on my phone. I go, yeah, we're in a different country. Go up, tell them your boarding pass, tell them your confirmation number. And she's like, oh. And then she goes, what happens after security? I go, we get to the plane, Caitlin. What world are you living in?
Yeah. I mean, it's just a shame that you managed to be on the same flight with a couple of attendees on the way back, because they were like, the trip didn't end for Bradshaw till he got home. For
I was
me,
hiding. They're like, where did you go on the
cab.
plane? I go, don't worry, baby. I was gone. I was literally, my social battery was zapped.
I mean, well, I guess that's the thing, doing the retreats, just like anything else, like running the center or doing teacher trainings, like it does involve other hats, not just teaching classes, all the managing and people complaining and all the things that happen.
Oh, it's a whole, it's like you're putting on a mini wedding every day. That's what I compare it to.
And you want to know something? I hear of teachers, like, I'm sure Jason Crandall even is this way. Like when he does retreats, like I can't imagine that he's spending as much time with the students as we do, like maybe dinners here and there. But I think we have taken a very like hands-on approach to really like connect and bond with people. Like we're like,
as the big grand,
we're like kind of like hanging out with them all day too. And I think in the future, not that we are going to stop doing that, but we need to learn to manage our own like energy reserves, because it is pretty draining. Just
this is me at the end of the night. This is me at the end of the night in bed.
Yeah, no, I'm an introvert. Like when I'm done, I'm done. But Bradshaw, we're learning, is like a extroverted introvert, because he needs a nap. He needs to like recharge in some isolation.
No, it's a thing. Like you're kind of like having to be on when you're the facilitator and kind of holding space for everybody. And then when you get home, it's like you don't have any more left in the tank.
Like, there's
like
nothing.
My family knows at some point, Dad he has to turn off. He's not talking for a while,
Yeah.
You've heard your voice a little bit too much in one day.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm like stuck in like admin mode. So we'll get back to our hotel room. This trip, we had to share a hotel room. And I'm like, hey, we have to do X, Y, and Z. And Bradshaw's like, the talking. Just like, you have to stop the talking. I'm like, okay.
But also like because the thing is too, is like, she's taught me more to be like, okay, there are things that need to get done. We have to get them done tonight. And I'm like, okay, I'll pull myself to it. Like, we have to count money, or we have to put something into spreadsheets or whatever. But there's also a point where she'll just keep going. And I go, no, we're done today. Like
he's like, no, the talking. I'm like, the talking
about the money and the spreadsheets and the surfing tomorrow. Wake me up tomorrow and we can talk about it. But I don't care if Mary Sue forgot to get her surfboard. I don't have time for this right now. I need to go to bed.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I'm coming to now, I mean, I really appreciate hearing from you guys today. It is really cool. And I think people listening to this will get a taste of your dynamic that's on the podcast, because it's come through in our conversation today as well. But I guess when I think about the way that you're managing to do it, because I've been looking at like a lot of different models and people opening different types of centers and people doing kind of like charging in series as opposed to drop-ins, and like all these different ways that people are kind of trying to make it come together. And I've talked to somebody else who seems to have like a similar thing to what you're doing. They're not doing a podcast, but they do retreats, and they've managed to make them work for some time, because they're doing it in a personal way like you, and they're really tending to people and making them special occasions that people want to do each year. However, it is a grind. Like it's a major grind. Like one of the things that we all like, our eyes got all kind of glimmery during the pandemic was like passive sources of income and kind of creating on-demand video courses. And some of us have managed to make some of that work too, where it's not just more of your time. Like we're talking about feeling depleted by all the talking. And like, that's one of the things, like as I'm getting older, I'm 52 now. Like I literally can't do as much as I used to. And it is such a grind. And so there's a diminishing, like if you can't teach 16 classes a week and get 16 people to come on 2 retreats with you every year, or get a group, like one year you'll get a group of 15 people to do your training and you're golden, but the next year you get 5. And so like that can kind of really be hard. I mean, I guess you kind of have to roll with it, and that's what we do.
Yeah, I think that we've been consistently slowly growing, which has helped too.
Yeah.
And so I think that like what we're providing is really of quality. So I don't fear so much as like, are we going to fill the retreats like we did prior? We're going to fill these up. Like I have a lot of confidence, and I think that's helpful because we're not coming from a scarcity space. But I also think that like for me, I would much rather hustle and do a week retreat and make a big chunk of money than slave for 17 classes a week for a month.
Yeah.
So it's like, no matter what you do, no matter what your work, there always is some kind of grind and hustle, I think.
Yeah. It's just
So it's just like, it just depends on what you want to put your time into. And I would much rather do retreats and trainings than teaching 16 classes a week.
Yeah, but the people who come to the retreats and training know you from your 16 classes a week, right?
I know.
And they also know us from our Instagram.
I know. And see, that's the thing. They can mix.
So listen to our podcast, The Funny Thing About Yoga. Thank you.
No, it is true. I think like right now being in a new city, like I am part of the reason why I'm like saying yes to a lot is because like I want this community to know me so that I can get not only build community here because I'm new, but also like it does feed into the business. So it's just like pulling from a bunch of different places, and we'll see. Maybe one day the podcast will be, and the Instagram might be the primary place we pull from. But I think something Bradshaw and I talk about a lot is like the longevity of this career. Like, and I don't want to be like what does retirement look like? Like I don't want to be teaching the amount of classes I'm teaching in my 60s or 70s. And so, but I also ask myself, do I want to be doing as many retreats as we'll be doing? So we are really starting to like think about that and have those conversations. And, I think something that I think about is that like our teacher's Jason Crandall, like the Jason Crandalls of the world and the, all these people that we looked up to learn from them. I'm like, are there people in our generation that are taking those titles? Are they like inheriting them in some way?
Wait a second. I have to jump in because you just hit on something that I really think about. And Jason Crandall is the kind of example for me is that I don't think that the same kind of yoga celebrity exists that once did. Because Jason was one of the last because he kind of was one of the people who
Yoga Journal. He
had a Yoga Journal connection.
Glow.
He did those conferences and he was one of the last, and I was his peer and I was a B-lister. You know what I mean? I never got to the A list, but there was a sense of potential career advancement.
Yes, of course.
And that potential career advancement was tied into like a little bit of reach or celebrity. And I do feel like that's kind of gone away, which on some levels kind of a good thing because it's kind of made it more horizontal or like more level. You don't have these like celeb teachers and then all of us over here as much. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like there's as much like, I'm glad to hear you're growing and things are going good and I'm praying that it will continue to do so. But I know for a fact that even though some of those teachers who you would think, I've seen Richard Freeman on Instagram doing selfie videos with his wife, and just that they have to do that is evidence to me that they're needing to make efforts to try to, and these are like senior teachers who you wouldn't think would need to be doing Instagram reels are doing Instagram reels. Eddie Stern's doing asana demonstrations again. For years, teachers weren't doing asana demonstrations on their social media, but they're doing them again. And I think that's because I don't know, the industry.
The culture's changed. Everything's changed.
I think so. Well,
I'm
not trying to like be a downer Debbie, like, oh no, it all sucks and we can't make a living. Because clearly you guys are managing still and I'm managing still. But it feels like I used to have this idea like there was a trajectory for me.
The latter.
And I don't feel that as much in the same. It's a little bit more like keeping things smaller scale in a way makes more sense than this idea of trying to get bigger almost.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even tell. I talked to Jason yesterday on the phone.
Oh, you didn't tell me that.
Yeah, I know. I forgot to tell you. But we were talking because I got some. Giana knows this, but a couple places reached out to me in the Midwest to come and do retreats. That also not retreats. Excuse me, to do like workshops, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Which Giana's like, I don't want to come to the Midwest for that, and I'm like, totally fair. But we were, like little. Like, like how it used to be. You used to travel and do workshops. You know what I mean?
You even got those invitations is encouraging. I'm glad to hear there's people doing it.
But I feel like that's just coming back. And it's been how many years after COVID?
We've done a few, we joked last year that we're going to go on tour, but we did a few together last year. There's definitely still opportunities like that. But when I think about like the big platforms that propelled people into like that status of yoga celebrity. I think about the yoga journal conferences, and now yoga journals
They're all
online.
gone.
And then
There's not
Wanderlust,
even in print. Wanderlust.
Andrew Tanner's trying to bring it back with the Berkshire Yoga Festival, but Wanderlust and all those like travel circuits that were around,
Totally.
not as much anymore.
Totally. So yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what's next. And I think, in the spirit of just like being innovative and staying resilient, we're just like trying to do what we can do as we start thinking, more towards our future. Like, I think we talked about this a little bit, but like, we don't practice the way that we used to practice anymore. And we're not trying to hustle the way we used to hustle. And I guess it comes back to that cheesy saying of just like working smarter, not harder, but it is still really, really freaking hard.
It is. And I guess the last bit for me in it is the only reason we would do it is because it's meaningful and like we care about it, like it is a passion job. I think at some point there might have been this like a narrative around, I could quit my investment banking job and have this like cool lifestyle and just do yoga all the time. But now it's like, it is one of those gigs, like if you don't love it, it doesn't make any sense to try to do it.
Yeah. And all these hours behind the computer. Sorry, go on.
Oh, no. Yeah. You were just saying the hours behind the computer.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the least like yogi in my life. I'm like, I need to stretch right now. Yeah.
And I'll also I think the only reason that I've made it work this far is because I started teaching when I was 23 and I had no money. Do you know what I mean? So like, I had
you
no
don't have
idea
a choice.
what it was like.
You have to make it work somehow.
Yeah. So it was like, if I had gone, I don't know if I had, gone from some corporate job or whatever, I was making money and then going to do this. It's like, yes, I've made more money over the years, but when you're making no money and you're going to get paid $40 to teach a yoga class, is crazy when you're 23 because you have no money.
Yes.
And so I think that delusion is a good thing of why I'm at the space I'm at now, because if that wasn't the case, I don't think I would have done this.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I came to it a little bit later. I was like 27 when I started teaching, but I did, coming from the arts, same thing. I was like, it's very much that parallel. So one low paying market to the next.
I mean, I think it's true. If the idea that you're going to be able to pay for your life with yoga teaching is, you got to be a little bit delusional. And in a way, it works. So again, sometimes we're still doing it somehow. And again, what else are we going to do with ourselves? I will say that I always have had it in the back of my mind that if it ever came to pass,
you'd
that
be a stripper.
It wasn't, that wasn't what I was going to say.
Look at your hair, you have stripper hair.
I was going to say that I would be okay. Like, you can't cling to it in a way. Like, that's the thing. Like, to try to cling to like your identity as a yoga teacher kills it in a way, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. I'm looking at the clock.
We've been talking for like 4 hours.
But super fun. I really appreciate kind of the energy you guys are bringing to your show and the transparency. And again, I've always wanted to have these kind of conversations, and I've heard you talk about this as well. Like, it's not everybody you can geek out with about this stuff. And for teachers who are out there in the grind, it is really helpful to hear people talk about it in a real way. And they can certainly get that on your show. So very cool to have had this time to speak with you. And let's be in touch, okay?
Yes,
we'll talk again soon. Thank you so
Thanks
much
for having us.
Of course. I'll let you know when it's going to go out and stuff, okay?
Perfect.
Okay, that was awesome.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Jay.
Bye, guys.
And there you have it. That was fun, wasn't it? I had a great time. I hope you enjoyed it. I sure did. And I have been thinking about this conversation quite a bit since we recorded it. I've been talking with some other folks in my weekly teachers call about it. One of the biggest takeaways off top that I'm still in shock about is the going rate for corporate gigs is $250? What? And you know what? They had somebody on their show, somebody who specializes in doing like these corporate gigs, And she was talking about doing 30-minute chair classes while people are sitting at their desks for $250 a pop. And I'm still like freaking out in my mind about that. Holy crap. How do I get one of those gigs? I could just one of those a week. One 30-minute chair class for $250 a week. And that would put this yoga center in the green. Literally, if I could get that gig right now, it would put the yoga center into the green. It would totally finance the yoga center. And I was thinking about that. I was like, well, how do you get that gig? How do you get that corporate gig for $250 a pop? And, if you go and listen to the podcast episode that Giana and Bradshaw did, they make it sound like it's not that hard. It's pretty easy. But truth is, you got to go in and pitch that. You got to know somebody at that corporation, or you got to find an in, or you got to go to the HR department and sell it. And that's the part I've never been very good at, especially when you're asking for $250 a class. I know it's a corporation, you see. It's not a person. It's not some person who has to work some job to try to pay their rent, and then you're asking them for $250. See, that's the thing. I mean, I guess in the past I had like rich clients or whatever, like people who had a lot of money who were coming to my class, and it was no sweat for them to drop $250 for a yoga class. But I don't know many of those people these days. And again, it's not corporations. It's just like HR departments, and they've got like these budgets, it's like instead of the pizza party, you get the weekly yoga class or whatnot. Or somebody sold it to a higher up about it, how it's going to help the job performance or people's mental health or keep your employees happier. I imagine there's all kinds of ways to pitch it. But still, you got to go get that gig. And as we were discussing, if you depend on that gig, then, it's not, I mean, sometimes they stick around for a while, but then they can go away. But still, I would love that gig. If somebody called me up tomorrow and was like, hey, do you want to do it? I would say yes. So that's crazy. That's a crazy thought to me that, wow, people are making that much money to teach a class. But power to them. And maybe I'm just a dumbass. I got to get it together. I don't know. But the other thing that I was thinking a lot about is that they're making the retreats work for them. And I know other people who are doing that as well. But that's definitely a grind. And you got to be at a place in your life where you want to do that, to put that together. You got to have a student base. And I'm very happy that Giana and Bradshaw are finding some online student base, because that's a thing. But I don't know. I'm also concerned for them about it sustaining over time. But that's the thing. Right now, it doesn't matter. Again, you don't start worrying about that until you're in your 50s as much, Doesn't matter to you at that time. It didn't to me when I was 36 or 38. I was definitely not thinking the way I'm thinking. I do think it's very hard to take on any kind of business model that means you're going to always need to grow. Like if you need to forever be growing, that's a problem. And almost anybody I know who has grown a thing at some point hits a ceiling and then has to assess from there. But more than anything, I like the fun that they're having being yoga teachers, and I like the spirit of professionalism that they're bringing to it. Like they take it seriously, like they're having fun and they're making jokes on their podcast, but you can tell that they take being yoga teachers seriously. They care about what they're doing. They want to do it well, and they want to help people, I think. And I like the feeling that there's folks like Giana and Bradshaw holding it down, So kudos to the both of you. Go check out their podcast, The Funny Thing About Yoga. There'll be a link in the description. Let's stay in touch. I want to check in with them again at some point. I need their perspective. And one thing that Bradshaw did say, he talked about how there was maybe like the weekend workshops coming back. And that did get me thinking, you know, in 2019, before everything fell apart, that's what I was doing. I was organizing tours of doing these weekend intensives. Some of you listening may have met me at one of those. And I did like 1 or 2. I did the Manchester, Dublin trip. Shout out to any of you who were at those and are listening. But I really haven't done stuff since then. And then I've just been doing the center. But you know what? I'm totally game to do some weekend intensives again. But here's the thing. The reason they were working was because people who were listening to this show reached out to me and told me that they had a space that we could use. And that's the issue. Like right now, me going out and finding venues and having to kind of like do that whole thing and put money down for those. And then kind of, you know, it's a little different than doing retreats, organizing your own weekend intensives, finding a venue and whatnot. So here's the deal. If you're listening to this right now and you have a space or you know of a space that we can use for pretty cheap, and maybe you've got like a couch that I can crash on, then let's put together a weekend intensive. We don't really need a lot of people. Like depending on where you are and how much the travel is going to cost, usually it only takes about like 10 people. And sometimes in the past, depending, it was like we only needed like 7 to 10 people to totally make it work. So I haven't put out a call like that in a long time. So I'm doing it now. If you're listening to this and you think it would be fun to have me come to wherever you are, I'm sure I could bring a few people from the show. Maybe you could bring a few friends. We could put together a weekend and we can do some yoga practice. We can have some discussion about things that are important to us. And I think that would be pretty cool. So if that sounds like you, reach out, go to the website, go to the contact page, send me a note. Let's make something happen. Also, let me mention that I am going back to the Berkshire Yoga Festival this year in June. So if you want to come to a yoga festival, I'm going to be at one in June. You can find that on the website also. But otherwise, I'm just holding it down here. And, you know, I was talking to Jonathan Satin a couple weeks ago about marketing campaigns, and that's what I'm getting ready to do. I designed a new card, and I'm going to do card drops across the neighborhood and just put it out there a little bit more. Keep at it. What else are we going to do besides keeping at it? What else can we do? I suppose what I can do is keep my wits about me. I always say that here at the end of these outros, but I mean it. It's the main thing, is just trying not to let my mind spin out with worry, to just stay with the immediate things at hand, and to trust. That's what it comes down to trust that's going to work out one way or another. It certainly has thus far. And there's a faith that I will be taken care of. And that's a leap, I know. We haven't talked about the higher power God stuff in a while, although I'm going to go back there. Y'all, because it's still a big part of what's going on with me. Because when you face moments like this, when you face, you know, oncoming crossroads, and you're not really sure what to do, you need guidance. You need guidance from something bigger than yourself. So I'm feeling a deep need to call on that. So for whatever that might be worth to whoever you are, I sure hope you're doing okay. And at the very least, what do you say we be kind? Let's be kind to ourselves. Let's be kind to others. And I will talk to you again soon. Please take care. Cheers.